how do we as Christians handle these sorts of fearful, scary news events?
Well, I suppose that the one way suggested would be to find a hole in the sand and just stick your head in it.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 62, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. Well, welcome to another foray into faith, firearms, and freedom. Here on Armed Lutheran Radio, we discuss the intersection of gun rights and our life as Christians. Thank you for joining us again. We've got a great show in store for you as usual. Sergeant Bill's here to talk about the difference between the top shooters in competition and the average Joes. Mia Anstine is back from her trip to Florida talking about those scary black rifles. And we're tackling a blog post from a Methodist Bishop who channels his inner Joe Biden a little later with Pastor John Bennett. Aaron Israel is on vacation in Washington, D.C. with his family, seeing the sights and finding the swamp is curiously undrained. Go figure. Be sure to check out the Reformation Gun Club, our membership site for fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. Lots of members-only content there and special discounts available only for members of the Reformation Gun Club for as little as $1.13 a month if you sign up for a 2-year membership. Check that out at gunclub.armedlutheran.us for all the details. And please support our sponsors. We got a lot of great companies that make this show possible. I want to thank Lee Armory for their support. They're makers of fine quality AK rifles. U.S. Reloading Supply in Florida's got everything you need if you're serious about reloading. Galloway Precision in my home state of North Carolina. Trigger conversion kits for popular carry guns. Guns for Gals right here in Texas, and McKinney, Texas is an awesome women-friendly firearm shopping experience, and RAE Gear USA makes high-quality magazine and tool sheaths, and Sergeant Bill reviewed their mag sheaths on last week's show. Go back and check that out. And our primary sponsor, of course, Bob Cook at Cook's Holsters. I've been using Cook's Holsters for years. I trust them with my carry and competition gear, and you can too. Be sure to check out all of these great companies, their products. Many of them are offering discounts on your purchases if you use a promo code. Be sure to thank them for their support and get some really great gear while you're at it. All right, we're going to start out today with a story out of California. That gun control utopia where gun safety laws are making everyone so much safer. I don't know whether you saw this story. If you saw it, you would remember it. It's out of Hawthorne, California. This account of this story comes from the Daily Mail, the UK Daily Mail. A gunman who allegedly tried to rob 4 people in a restaurant parking lot accidentally shot himself in the head as he tried to get away, according to police. The suspect was run down by one of his victims, causing him to unwittingly shoot himself in the head. Basically, here's what happened. The video shows diners leaving the restaurant, getting into a car. A man approaches the vehicle, attempts to rob them. He was attempting to get away, essentially. He ran around the corner of the building where there were 2 accomplices waiting for him in a getaway car. His would-be victim decided they were not going to take this lying down. They backed the car up and hit him. And according to Lieutenant Ty Getz from Hawthorne Police, said he's running away from the scene with a gun in his hand when the victims chased him in the car and they struck him. It launched his body up in the air, and somewhere in that process, the gun in his hand fired, resulting in him getting a bullet in the head. The suspect's in critical but stable condition in hospital. So that's what you call a little bit of poetic justice, I guess. stupidity meets the sympathetic reflex. You can't help but laugh at this, but really, what are the chances of this happening? This is kind of what we're talking about in the Bible with the Matthew 26:52. Those who take up the sword will die by the sword, right? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And so you can't help but laugh. And some of the comments in this article are quite humorous, but others gave me pause. And then there was this comment from the manager of the restaurant who said, "I'm not going to say any prayers for the suspect because he kind of got what's coming to him. He decided to rob somebody, and that's what happens. You're taking a chance whenever you do something like that. I'm not going to say any prayers for the suspect because he got what's coming to him." Now, we hear a lot of this sort of stuff when Americans, and interestingly enough, if you read the comments, it wasn't just Americans saying this stuff, but you hear this a lot especially from pro-gun people. He got what he deserved, good riddance. A lot of the comments sort of bear this out, this particular article, The driver should have reversed course and backed over him and saved the taxpayers money. It sucks that he's alive. Too bad they didn't kill him. Hopefully he's paralyzed or has brain damage. Why waste tax money on him to be treated in the hospital? Should have just left him there. Well done. Hope somebody pulls his life support. And those comments bother me. But this reminded me, for some reason, of the biblical story of Jonah. You remember that guy, right? The Book of Jonah in the Old Testament. It's really short. It's only 4 chapters. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Now Jonah was called by God to go to this place, Nineveh, pretty wicked town, and to proclaim God's wrath to the citizens of that city. And he didn't want to do it, so he tried to run away from his responsibilities. God found him, of course, and he ended up, as we all know, if you're familiar with the story, he ended up in the belly of a whale for 3 days, ultimately repented, and went on to Nineveh to preach God's word. And once he'd done that, the people of Nineveh repented of their sins, and they prayed to God for forgiveness and for mercy. And God spared the city and its inhabitants. But Jonah wasn't happy with this. He endured a lot in his travels. I guess being in the belly of the whale was not fun. I'm sure it was pretty stinky. But he wanted to see God mete out punishment. He wanted to see the people of Nineveh get what was coming to them. Now this is hard teaching. This is something that I struggle with myself. It's easy to see the criminal in a story like this and write them off and say things like, good riddance, to rejoice in their suffering, their injury, or their death. But we got to remember, as Christians, we're called to love our neighbors, and the criminal is still our neighbor. That's really hard to wrap your head around sometimes. And that doesn't mean we can't or we shouldn't defend ourselves. That doesn't mean we should be pacifists, that we should give up the use of, potentially lethal force in defense of our lives and our loved ones. That's not what I'm saying. Go back and read Greg Hopkins' excellent book, A Time to Kill. Listen to his interview on the show last year. Once the criminal's brought under control, we as Christians are called to forgive them, to pray for them, and if possible, to minister to them. But like Jonah, we don't want to do it. We want to see punishment. Our sinful flesh wants to see the criminal get what's coming to him. But as Christians, there's more to it than a desire to see a criminal pay for their crime. We shouldn't desire vengeance. Let's never allow our desire for justice or our sinful desire for vengeance to blind us to the mercy and grace of Jesus Christ. Christ who died for your sins and my sins and the sins of the goofball who shot himself in the head after robbing someone in a Denny's parking lot. Coming up after the break, we'll get started with the show with our Ballistic Minute, Mia's motivations, and clinging to God and guns. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
AK pattern rifles are known for their rugged reliability in all types of conditions. The best AK pattern rifles come from the desert of Arizona. Lee Armory builds AK pattern rifles using premium imported parts. Lee Armory's enhanced receivers are properly heat treated with CNC drilled trunnion and scope mount holes, Tapco triggers, polished bolt carrier and hammer, receiver rails modeled after the Saiga design to prevent bolt carrier jump, and barrels made from 4150 vanadium steel nitrided to 1200 degrees to make them harder, more durable, and more accurate. Plus, they offer a limited lifetime warranty. The AK pattern rifle is legendary for its reliability. Lee Armory takes the AK and adds a whole new level of quality and customer service. Available at Copper Custom, Classic Firearms, AIM Surplus, and Elite Ordnance, or visit leearmory.us to see the entire line of Lee premium AK rifles, optics, and accessories. Lee Armory premium AK pattern rifles, born under the Red Star, perfected in Arizona. leearmory.us. As many of you know, Sergeant Bill and I are competitive shooters. We're also reloaders. Bill helped me to get started last year, but I've still got a lot to learn. One thing I do know, though, you need a good source for supplies and components. So let me tell you about U.S. Reloading Supply. Yeah, there are bigger suppliers out there, but what sets U.S. Reloading Supply apart from the rest is their dedication to customer satisfaction. Check them out at usreloadingsupply.com. They carry the top name brands like Starline, Rainier, Barry's, Remington, Spear, and Hornady. If you've got a special order like primers and powder that you don't see on their website, give them a call for a quote. I did and got a great price. Excellent customer service, fast delivery, prices that include shipping, and a promise to match or beat any retailer's price, including shipping. Call them today, 941-451-7357, or visit them today at usreloadingsupply.com and use the promo code Lutheran2017 to save 10% off your order. usreloadingsupply.com.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, this is your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill. Today I'm going to talk about the difference between the average Joe competition shooter and the top shooters in the sport. Now, the top shooters in the sport, their technical skills, their draws, their reloads, their transitions, their splits, all the things that you can measure that you do in just about every match, every stage you shoot. They have these skills consistent and subconscious because they've done so much practice, so many reps of them, that when it's time to do a reload, they just do a reload. They're not thinking, oh, I need to do a slide lock reload and then overhand and run the slide. They're empty, they reload, they move on. The top shooters also have a really strong mental game, and with their execution of that mental game. So what they'll do is it's their consistency of that mental game. So when they go to shoot a stage, they will prep their stage plan, and they will do lots and lots of mental reps of it so that they are completely prepared for what is going to happen. As soon as the buzzer goes off, they just execute what they've already gone through visually in their mind 10, 20, 30 times before they've done it. And because of that, they are extremely consistent. They don't make any major mistakes, and their execution is phenomenal. Now, another point I've heard professional shooter, sponsored shooters say that he treats his training and practice like it's a part-time job or part of his lifestyle. And what they mean by that is that they're doing it, they're practicing or they're training, they're trying to get better at their craft every day or almost every day, whether that's dry fire or live fire range sessions, whatever it may be. Steve Anderson even talks about on his podcast that sometimes you get your best gains in dry fire practice when you don't really want to be doing the practice. You're just kind of there going through the motions, and you're just kind of observing what you're doing, and you start to notice, hey, I keep doing this and I really need to do it this way, and it leads through a breakthrough. Now, the last thing that I've noticed that makes the top shooters better than the average shooters is their measured skills, their metrics. So basically, they know how fast they can shoot a stage. They can almost tell you the exact time it should take for them to shoot a stage, because they know how long it takes for them to draw and hit a 15-yard target, and then move to a barricade and shoot 3 shots over here, do a reload, and they know how long it takes for them to do all this stuff, because they've done it so many times in dry fire and in live fire, running the timer, that they know how long it takes them to do those skills. They know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they try to formulate their plans and their practice so that their weaknesses become their strengths, and they know exactly what they can do. So what can an average shooter learn from this? With your technical skills, you need to develop a plan so that you can have a consistent practice schedule, whether it's twice a week or 3 times a week, or just a couple 10-minute sessions, whatever it may be. It's consistent. That consistency is going to get you your improvements and get you better. The mental game and your execution, when you shoot a match, sanctioned or club match, or whatever it may be, take the time to set up your stage plan and go over it and over it and over it. So by the time you go up to shoot, you're just waiting for that buzzer so you can do it. If you're like me, I'm a competitive shooter, mostly because it's fun, but also because I conceal carry all the time, and I also carry a gun for a living. So it's part of my lifestyle. If you carry concealed and shoot competition to make your skills better for your defensive handgun use, think of it as your lifestyle. If you need to set up a plan so that you can get your practice in and make a couple matches every now and then so that you can test yourself and see where you're at. And lastly, your measured skills. So you'll need a timer for this, even if it's just a little iPhone shot timer, or if you have an actual shot timer. You can do this in dry fire or live fire if you have a range you can live fire on, and have a pen and paper and work on certain drills like a draw and 1 shot to a 5-yard target, and do 10 of those. Write the times down and see where your average is, so that you know what you can do. Push the target back, put it at 15 yards, draw 1 shot to 15 yards. Now you'll know, hey, I can draw and shoot at 15 yards in 2.5 seconds, or whatever the time may be. And the same thing with all the basic skills that you use when you're shooting competition. Know what your dry fire 1 shot, slide lock reload, dry fire 1 shot. You should know, but through your practice, you can learn how quickly you can do that. And through that dry fire practice, you can figure out what your weaknesses are and practice those more and make them strengths. I've had a problem in the last year or so shooting one-handed, strong hand only or weak hand only, and I've been really working on that, and I'm getting better at it through practice. So you don't have to spend an hour every day doing dry fire, then go to the range 3 times a week. I can't even do that. But maybe you could do 15 minutes twice a week when you get home from work, and then go to the live fire range once every other week and work on those skills. And with practice, you'll see you're getting better and better. With those measured skills, you'll start seeing that your times are getting better and better. And that's how you get better at being a competition shooter. I'm Sergeant Bill, and this has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. Where gun culture meets the gospel, this is Armed Lutheran Radio.
So how many of you have been in this situation? You hear about a gun or you read about it, you decide you want to check it out. You go and you try it out at a gun show or at your local gun store and you decide to buy. Maybe it feels really good in your hand, the price is right, the size is perfect, but then you take it to the range and the trigger is awful. Now you've got that gun that you've invested your time and your money in, but you don't like to shoot it. So you either trade it, maybe you try to sell it and hope that you can make some of your money back, or you grin and bear it. Well, what if I told you that you can get the performance that you wanted out of the gun that you already have? Galloway Precision makes trigger conversion kits for a wide range of guns to produce smoother, lighter, better functioning triggers. Galloway Precision is your carry pistol specialist. Check out their complete collection of performance parts at gallowayprecision.com and use the promo code Lutheran2017 to save 10% off your order. Make the gun that you choose to carry better with precision parts from gallowayprecision.com.
The percentage of women who own guns is growing. American women are more knowledgeable and better equipped to defend themselves than ever before. So, why is it that every time I go to a gun shop, I feel like they're talking down to me? Like, hey little lady, let me show you what you need. It's like all they want to do is sell me a pink gun. If you're tired of feeling that too, visit Guns for Gals, a specialty firearms boutique designed to empower women with information about firearm safety and to equip them with the means to protect themselves. The owners go out of their way to find products specifically for women, and they actually listen and ask questions to help you find the right products to meet your needs. If they wouldn't own it themselves, they won't sell it. Guns for Gals is located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. Open Monday 1 to 6 and Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7. And on weekends, you can find them at a gun show near you. Or shop online at www.gunsforgals.com. Guns for Gals, more than just a gun shop. It's how gun shopping should be.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hey everybody, hello again. Last week, I talked about being safe during our travels. I mentioned it because I travel a lot, but also because I had a gentleman who interviewed me during my trip home. He asked several questions that I would deem a bit too personal for general acquaintance chit-chat. But in the conversation, I did dabble in a bit of gun talk. I tested the waters just to see how this gentleman would react, because sometimes you can find somebody who is receptive if they aren't sure about guns. And this gentleman, he is from Florida, and that's where I was traveling from because I was on a hog hunt down there. He had asked what I was doing down there, and I told him I was hunting hogs, and he seemed kind of detached from the idea of hunting a hog. He said that nobody really does that anymore, and in Florida, nobody hunts, and nobody hunts hogs. So he obviously doesn't know a lot about his state, but more about the actual city that he lives in. So we talked a bit about the nuisance of hogs in his state, and he was surprised to learn about that. If you would like to learn more about it yourself, you can listen to our episode on Mac Outdoors podcast about hog hunting and how you can get started hunting. So on that note, we chatted a little more and about guns, and the gentleman was not anti-gun and actually grew up with shotguns and a little bit of bird hunting. So he had some experience, but has since distanced himself from that former life. And while he was talking, he talked about our new president and the government, and he really wasn't for the gun grab. However, he did mention, but nobody needs any of those AR guns. And I stopped him right there and I smiled, and he looked at me. He was a bit taken aback by the expression on my face. And I told him, well, do you know what I was hunting with in Florida? And so I told him, I said, I won't show you the picture of the dead hog because I don't want to turn you off. So I said, but I want to show you the gun that I was hunting with. Because in Florida, I was hunting with a Remington R25 rifle. And this was chambered in .308. And I showed him, I was like, this is the gun you're talking about. He had said, nobody hunts with these guns. And I said, this is the gun that you said nobody needs. Well, I was hunting with it this past week on a hog hunt in Florida. And really, he just grew silent. He was like thinking. You could tell this gentleman was very intelligent, very intellectual. And you could tell he was really thinking about this, need of AR guns. And so then I took the discussion into that of gun laws, gun rights, the existing gun laws we have that aren't always enforced, and the need to enforce the existing laws before we start adding new laws. So it was really, in the end, a great conversation, and I know that I at least touched one life in the world and informed him that not all guns are bad, even if they're ARs. In the end, it was a lot of fun to chat with him. So let me tell you a little bit more about this R25 Remington rifle and why it was great for the hunt. This rifle is a lot lighter than many rifles, which is great because it was a long day of hunting. And if I had to carry around a large wood-stocked gun, it might grow heavy at the end of the day. The rifle also allows you to automatically cycle around, so you're able to reacquire and take a second shot if you didn't have a good first shot. This is necessary with big game as well, because some big animals are a little more difficult to take down than a smaller animal. So you always want to be prepared for a follow-up shot, and that R25 allows you to do that. Then my hunting partner, he also was hunting with a AR-style rifle. He was hunting with a Bushmaster, and he actually had a 300 Blackout, and it had a suppressor on the end of it. And I actually loved the suppressor because it was great on our ears. You still need a bit of hearing protection because it doesn't make it silent. And I talked about that in previous episodes as well, if you all want to look back on some of the archives from Armed Lutheran. Suppressors don't make guns silent, but it does reduce that sound, and it was great to be alongside someone else using one because it wasn't impacting our ears as badly. So I really liked that, and one thing that he noted was that he was able to take a second shot even more rapidly than I was because suppressors reduce recoil. So these are real life scenarios where you use not just an AR style gun, but also suppressors. And in real life, we hunt hogs because they're a nuisance problem. They grow so rapidly. And as I mentioned, you can learn more about the hog populations and why we hunt them in the Mac Outdoors podcast with Mia and Leah. Check out those archives and you can learn more. Thank you for stopping in and allowing me to chat with you today. Get out there, learn about guns, learn which different styles work for different things. Those AR guns aren't for murdering people. They're actually used in competitions and they're used in hunting, and they're not evil like some people try to portray.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
If you carry a multi-tool or pistol magazine every day, check out RAE Gear high-quality tactical sheaths. Designed with the needs of law enforcement, military, first responders, and concealed carriers in mind, RAE Gear sheaths are made from powder-coated stainless steel, making them strong, corrosion-resistant, and lightweight. They feature a spring steel belt clip for easy deployment and removal. Your tool or magazine can be easily accessed with just one finger, and yet the integrated retention keeps your tool or magazine secure even when turned upside down. RAE Gear's tool sheaths are designed to work with a variety of Leatherman brand multi-tools, and their new line of quick deployment mag sheaths offer the same tough construction and corrosion resistance for carrying most double-stacked 9mm, 40 caliber, and 357 SIG magazines. Check out the full line of products at www.raegearusa.com and be sure to use the promo code ALR at checkout and save 10% off your order. Recognize, assess, execute. raegearusa.com.
So you have your concealed carry permit or license to carry. Now what? Now you need a good holster. Not one of those cheap neoprene prophylactic holsters you can buy in the big box stores. You need a holster custom built for the firearm you intend to carry every day. Check out cooksholsters.com. Made in the USA, Cooks holsters are available in a wide range of colors and designs for inside the waistband or outside waistband carry. They carry a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and take 15% off everything in the store. You put in the time and effort to legally carry a firearm for personal protection. Protect your firearm with a custom holster from cooksholsters.com.
Up next, We're clinging to God and guns with Pastor John Bennett.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another edition of Clinging to God and Guns with Pastor John Bennett of St. John Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. Pastor, welcome back.
Thank you, Lloyd.
I know it's been a really busy couple of weeks with Lent and funerals, and I know you've been staying very busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time today.
I had 8 services in 8 days.
Oh, my goodness.
As I like to joke sometimes, I like to find the guy that told me I'd only have to work 1 day a week and kick him square in the nuts.
That's right. All right, we're looking today at a commentary from the United Methodist Church, my former church, by what we found out this morning is the late Bishop Felton Edwin May. Lord rest his soul, apparently passed away in February, but this was written back in May of 2013, and it's entitled, By All Means, Save Some. And the subtitle is A Commentary on the Recent Senate Vote Against Gun Safety Bills, which should give you some idea where we're going. Tragedy comes in threes, some say, and if that's so, then we've had our share on U.S. soil in recent weeks. What's left are vexing questions about what we can and will do to limit future tragedies. The beloved Boston Marathon became a Boston massacre when 2 unsuspected terrorists took precious lives and left broken, bloodied victims along with a nation in shock at its own vulnerability. Then a fertilizer plant storage facility exploded in tiny West Texas, also taking lives, destroying homes, and leaving us once again dismayed at our vulnerability, this time to environmental disaster when regulations are too often broken and not adequately enforced. However, the third tragedy, or rather the first, may be the most insidious and lethal over time because it has and will cost us many more lives through violence, murder, and suicide. The collection of sensible gun control bills that held much promise for our nation's safety and sanity, even the heavily compromised background checks bill, failed to reach the U.S. Senate's 60-vote threshold to become laws of the land. And sadly, the news coverage and painful outcry from that tragedy were too quickly muted by the horrific events of that same week.
So it's a tragedy when gun control bills don't get passed.
Yes. On par with a plant explosion and a terrorist attack.
And it was an insidious tragedy, he says. So
yes,
because he is now deceased, and I would assume received his eternal reward since he was a Christian. We'll try to not speak ill of him, but we can certainly speak ill of bad arguments.
Mm-hmm.
This assumes. He says that this bill cost us many more lives through violence, murder, and suicide. This is assuming that people that are intent on violence, murder, and suicide only do it if they have access to a firearm.
Yes.
I don't have access to a gun today, so I guess I'm not going to end it now.
Right. I don't feel as suicidal as I was before. I just can't find a gun to do it with. It also assumes that these crazy laws that didn't get passed would have any effect on people who don't obey the law in the first place.
Well, and these laws, to my recollection, they were trying to pass this universal background check that they've got in some states, which prohibits the sale or transfer between 2 private parties.
That's correct.
Which also prohibits, for example, if I have an heirloom rifle and I want to, I have a real nice Marlin lever action that's designed after the Winchester 94, and it was given to me by my father-in-law as an ordination gift. Now, when I get older, and if I wanted to hand that down to my son, laws like this would have prevented that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
They would have required, and granted, yes, I would have spent the $25 to do it because that's all my dealer charges. But going to a dealer and having to transfer it through that process, it's just ridiculous. It's an invasion upon the rights of law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, and it's the only people that it actually affects are those who would take the time to actually go and submit to the background check. And we all know that criminals won't do that because they're not doing it now.
Right. Well, and I don't know if this was the same group of bills or not, but there was a bill that was pushed around that same time to prohibit anyone who was on the quote-unquote terrorist watch list from possessing a firearm.
I don't think that was in the 2013 package of bills. I went back and looked, and what they were arguing about was the so-called universal background checks, like you said, that would expand to private transfers, private sales at gun shows, basically all private sales. They say internet sales, but that really is misleading because it's just private sales conducted over the internet. You still have to meet in person to transfer the thing.
Right. I bought a lot of guns over the internet, and so far I've been unsuccessful in getting anyone to mail them directly to my home.
Yes, it just doesn't work. Try though I may, the U.S. Postal Service just doesn't like those things. And then there were two others that, of course, our good friend Diane Franken-Feinstein decided to add in, which was her beloved assault weapons ban and...
Let's call it what it is, guns that look scary ban.
The guns that look scary ban and the guns with too many bullets ban. It was the magazine capacity ban. And all of them went down in flames because they couldn't get 60 votes. And then there was a Republican alternative because those went up in flames. Senator Grassley from Iowa had proposed a bill to improve the NICS background check system, and the Democrats, in their fit of pique, decided they would vote that down.
Because it wasn't their idea.
Because it wasn't their idea. Exactly right.
Let's face it, they only like things when it's their own idea and it agrees with their policies.
Yes. They don't want to improve the background check system. They want to ensnare as many good law-abiding citizens in the existing one as possible.
Right.
So back to the late bishop. While the deadly crimes and mayhem in Boston prompt investigations, analyses, and maybe public policy decisions, the postmortem on the Senate vote against gun safety can only evoke just criticism and cries of shame, for now. As he pleaded with the Tsarnaev brothers to surrender, their distressed uncle railed at them on television for the shame they brought on their family. I and many others could echo his cries at our senators who broke the hearts of gun victims' families everywhere, and also broke their vow to represent the interests of voters, an overwhelming majority of whom support universal background checks for gun purchases. This is straining my ability to not speak ill of the dead. Here's the problem. There's no darn such thing as a gun victim. I'm sorry.
Right.
The guns didn't just magically pop up and kill these people. This is like paganism, this idea that an inanimate object can, possess someone to do evil things.
It's voodoo liberal style.
That's right.
But this statement is assuming that the laws that were, or the bills that were proposed were in the best interest of the voters. The majority of the voters are law-abiding citizens. They've taken these polls that try and say that, the majority of Americans support background checks. They're wording the polls in such a way that they get the outcome they desire. If you were to phrase the question in such a way as, and ask this of gun owners, would you support a bill that would prohibit you from being able to gift a firearm to a loved one? They would probably say no. But they phrase the questions in such a way that they get the desired outcome.
And to suggest that the senators weren't doing the will of the voters when they voted against these things, they clearly were, because the majority of Americans don't support background checks. Polls show that they don't support an assault weapons ban. They don't support a magazine capacity ban because these are old, tired ideas that don't work. The shameful part of that vote was the lies of opponents and conspiracy theorists who misrepresented the content and intent of the bills before them and who profess more concern for protecting our right to keep and bear arms than protecting what our Constitution and our culture both value most, human life. I would like to see proof of that, but still. 25 people were shot over Easter weekend alone in my hometown, Chicago, and more than 400 people were victims of gunshots last year. That was in 2012, so it's gotten worse since then.
It's gotten a lot worse.
A lot worse. We're forced to grieve over too many Hadia Pendleton's young lives lost to illegal gun possession and senseless gun violence.
Well, he brings up, I looked up this case of Hadia Pendleton, and this is another one of those, what gun control laws would have prevented this from happening, because some gangbanger shot blindly into a crowd of students at a college prep high school. And struck and killed a young lady who incidentally had performed at Obama's inauguration.
Yep.
So that was big news. But again, you have a case where no background check law could have prevented this from happening.
Of those 400 people that he cites, how many of those killings would have been prevented by universal background checks? None. How many would have been prevented by assault weapons bans? Because absolutely none of the killings in Chicago are taking place with assault rifles.
Right. He makes this claim that somehow we care more about the right to keep and bear arms than protecting, quote, what our Constitution and culture both value most, human life. Well, first of all, the Second Amendment, part of that was because it was intended to not only preserve human life, but to preserve liberty. But does our culture really value human life? Look at what's going on with Planned Parenthood, where we've had these marches now recently about quote-unquote women's rights, where the only right they're really protesting about is the right to slaughter the unborn.
And back in 2013, when this was written, the Methodist Church was all on board with that.
Yes, they were. It was only until about a year ago that they changed their stance on that, which is both shocking as well as praiseworthy. But up until this time, the United Methodist Church defended the practice of abortion. So why doesn't he take a look at his own church body and their issues right now?
Yeah, I agree. We finally get to some theology in this next paragraph, and I'm going to change his count of the commandments because he's using the non-Lutheran way of doing it. Indeed, God's fifth commandment should be more vital to God's faithful than our Constitution's Second Amendment, enough so that rampant murders, whether they happen all at once or daily in our streets and homes, should prompt us to adhere even more vigilantly to the commandment than to the Constitution. Besides, no rights exist without responsibilities and necessary rules. Even the most fundamental right of voting requires registration and increasingly verification. So, all right, we finally get to a reference to some sort of theology, and it's pathetic.
Yes, it is. Well, it's this old argument that if you are in possession of a firearm, that somehow you're violating God's laws.
That you want to kill people.
It's just ridiculous.
And since God's faithful are not the gangbangers out killing each other in the streets, it really doesn't matter what the fifth commandment says, because they're not paying attention to God's law. If they don't care about violating God's law or facing God's wrath or eternal damnation, why are they going to care about a background check? It's just
right.
It's just nonsense.
Instead, we have to demonize inanimate objects. That's what we have to do.
Yes. And even the most fundamental right of voting requires registration and verification. Well, imagine if you had to submit to fingerprinting, background checks, waiting periods, or to fill out a form like a 4473 just to vote.
The ACLU would be all over that, wouldn't they?
In some states, like North Carolina, where I came from, you have to go ask the local sheriff for permission to buy a gun. You have to buy a permit to buy a gun. That's the equivalent of a poll tax if we're comparing gun rights to voting rights. I mean,
it's the same way here in Minnesota. You have to get a permit to purchase.
Yes.
Anything other than a rifle or shotgun, you have to get a permit to purchase.
Yep. I mean, I can go into a polling place somewhere where I don't even live and demand a provisional ballot, and then the law says they have to give it to me. But I can't do that when I go buy a gun. No, you got to sell it to me without checking to see who I am. No, they won't do that. It doesn't work that way.
No, and you probably have the county sheriffs waiting for you as you try to exit the store.
Exactly. The devotion some have to their right to possess arms becomes irrational when they see it as a right to willfully buy and sell arms, which is not in the Constitution. And zealous...
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
The right to keep and bear arms...
Well, you've got to make them yourself.
...shall not be infringed.
Well, I guess according to the good bishop, you're supposed to make them yourself, but not buy them.
Make them yourself. Well, the NFA prohibits me from doing that.
We could go talk to Heinrich at Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns, and he could make some for us. zealous resistance to legal oversight or common sense restraints, or to making existing public safety laws more universal and thus more effective, is more than irrational, it's dangerous. To restrict background checks to store sales and not include gun show, person-to-person, and internet sales, all of which are person-to-person, by the way, makes a mockery of the law and places everyone at risk.
Yeah, and you know what? There is no gun show loophole that they keep talking about. That's what he's bringing up here.
Right.
The quote-unquote gun show loophole is just a person-to-person sale.
Yes.
If you go to a gun show and you're buying from a dealer, guess what? You still have to go through the background check.
Yep.
If you go through internet sales, same thing. What it's restricting is freedom. But, he says here, making existing public safety laws more universal. They already are universal. You can't legally buy a firearm anywhere in the country unless it's a person-to-person sale between two private parties, unless you go through a background check.
Yep. Pontificating about people's right to bear arms when you don't know anything about the right to bear arms, which he obviously doesn't, because he keeps talking about these background check laws and making laws more universal, and he calls them public safety laws or gun safety. When you're trying to pass laws limiting people's freedoms based on ignorance, because most of the people who are proposing these laws don't know a whole lot about guns, let's face it. I mean, that just puts good people at risk. It ignores the fact that less than 2% of crime guns, I think it's less than 2% maybe on the high end, come from gun shows. It's already illegal to sell to felons, or to make a straw purchase, or to live in one state and buy a gun in another and then take it back without transferring it through a licensed firearms dealer. It's illegal to, like you said, buy a gun over the internet and have it shipped to your house. You can't do that unless it's, an old-timey gun. And who's going to monitor these private sales and magically prevent them from happening? I mean,
right.
The background check, the idea of a background check assumes that there's going to be somebody, either that the people who are engaged in these private sales are going to monitor themselves, because you're trusting that a criminal's going to not commit a crime simply because he's supposed to go get a background check first.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Otherwise, you got to have some Orwellian government watching everybody to make sure that they don't transfer a gun illegally.
Yeah, if they're not worried about following the laws now, why are they going to worry about following the laws when you pass a quote-unquote universal background check and prohibit private party sales?
Yeah. It's already illegal to sell to a felon, and yet most of the people who commit these crimes are already felons by the time they commit these crimes. The people who are committing the crimes in his hometown of Chicago, they're already criminals and shouldn't have guns, and somehow they still get them. So making it illegal to sell to a felon without a background check first, I guess that makes it super duper illegal.
It just wasn't illegal enough to begin with.
That's right. If we just make it really, really illegal, then they'll know we mean business. Gun safety laws have been proven to work.
He's from Chicago.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I can't help it.
I tried to do that. I tried to read the sentence with a straight face. I'm sorry. Let me try that again. Okay. Gun safety laws have been proven to work, despite the persistent lies of those who assert otherwise. Oh, gosh. Those who ignore that critical truth and instead submit to the purely mercenary motives of the National Rifle Association will bear blood on their hands for every death caused by firearms that end up in the wrong hands unnecessarily. Now, we're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but shame on him for this. You're going to sit and point the bony finger of indignation at the NRA and its 5 million members, and you talk about the fifth commandment earlier, you might want to, go back and read the eighth commandment, because you're impugning the motives of the NRA as mercenary and blaming them for violence in this sentence.
Right. It's saying that they have the blood on their hands for every death caused by a firearm that ends up in the wrong hands unnecessarily. The NRA isn't committing or creating criminals. They're not responsible for the thug that breaks into somebody's house and steals a firearm and then uses it to commit another crime.
Right.
But that's what he's arguing here.
Mm-hmm.
There was a case down in Texas not too long ago where there was videographic evidence of this, where a bunch of guys had rammed a truck into a gun store, and they completely ransacked the place.
That's one of the gun stores that I've shopped from. I've actually
Really?
shopped. Yeah, I've actually shopped there before. They've had that happen twice in 3 months.
Yeah, so every single one of those is going to end up in the hands of a criminal. You can just about guarantee it, or perhaps even the drug cartel, since you are in Texas and it's not that far to get over the border. And by his argument, he's saying that if any blood shed by the use of those firearms, it's on the NRA's head for that.
Nevertheless, says the bishop, the late bishop, I'm decidedly hopeful. My faith demands as much, that God's truth is marching on. We must appreciate and be encouraged by the progress of this recent and recurring endeavor. It took advocates a half dozen tries before the Brady Bill was signed into law 2 decades ago, although that law was later weakened. The poignant advocacy offered by courageous families of the Newtown, Connecticut mass shooting victims prevailed to force a Senate vote against efforts to prevent it through a filibuster. We deserve a vote, President Obama and the families of many victims proclaimed, and we got one. Bully on you. Now we deserve...
Yeah. You earned a cookie.
Yes. Here's your cookie. Now go home. Now
Brings up the Brady Bill. Okay. I'm originally from the People's Republic of California, as I like to call it. When the Brady Bill expired, California kept every provision of the Brady Bill and even strengthened it further.
Oh, it's gotten worse.
It's gotten so much worse. They keep increasing the variety of firearms that are banned. Yeah, it's so much stricter than the Brady Bill ever was. If the Brady Bill worked, then California should be a crime-free state.
Oh, yeah. It should be utopia by now.
Absolutely.
And yet, we got the Isla Vista killer. We got San Bernardino. This is just gobbledygook. And the weakening that he talks about, the weakening of the Brady Bill is the sunsetting of the assault weapons ban, which the FBI says had absolutely zero effect on crime.
And here's something interesting. There was just a video, a news story in Southern California in Orange County of some Hispanic man in his early 30s that was gunned down by 2 thugs in the middle of the night. And you see on the video, one guy's carrying an AK, which, hello, those are illegal in California.
Where did that come from?
Yes.
Leland Yee, probably.
The other guy is carrying something that looks like some variant of one of Masterpiece Arms' rifles or pistols.
Right.
But both of these firearms, you can tell that they had high-capacity magazines. They didn't follow that 10-round magazine ban.
No.
And here they killed somebody, and guess what? California's gun laws didn't stop them.
I'm shocked. Shocked, I say. Now we deserve much more. They deserve more than a cookie. We deserve... We must keep going, keep pushing, keep praying and organizing and working for gun safety. Indeed, gun sanity. Laws that will surely save some lives, not all, but some.
If they were worried about gun safety, then why don't they teach gun safety in the classroom anymore, like they used to?
Exactly. This save some, not all, but some thing reminds me of crazy Joe Biden and his argument, if we could just save one life, we should do it. Why not do things that will actually save lives, right? Why not save more? Why not save most? Rather than saving one. Why do we settle for one or some? It doesn't seem real smart to me. And now our second Bible reference, actually our first Bible reference, that's what the Apostle Paul wrote of his valiant mission to save souls in 1 Corinthians 9:22, that we might by all means save some. So let us use all means, he says, from hosting prayer vigils, protests, and community forums to buying ads and publishing options in print and social media, even to registering, informing, and transporting voters to the polls during the crucial congressional elections. Before we get to the Bible verse, this is just silly. I mean, he says all means, and then he says basically protesting, whining, complaining, writing letters.
And voter fraud.
That's right. All means, I guess, except for those that will actually save lives.
So here he is taking this passage where Paul is clearly preaching about the necessity of doing whatever we can to bring the gospel to those who are not saved, that they might become saved the salvation of their souls, and then using that as evidence of how we've got to protest and demonstrate and ship as many people as we can to the voter polls. Makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. So so what is Paul going on about here in 1 Corinthians 9:22? To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. Who is he talking about saving, and why some and not all?
He's talking about eternal salvation. Mm-hmm. So he's not talking about our life in this world. And he's talking about the reality that, hey, what he's saying here is not everyone's going to be saved, but I'm going to do whatever I can to save those who will be saved when they hear the gospel, receive it, and believe. That's the essence of what he's saying here. But somehow this applies to protesting and whatnot.
We can't be daunted by the unprincipled senators who voted no to sensible gun safety laws, whether they did it for heartless or spineless motives. We still have work to do, a charge to keep, a commandment to follow. There's another commandment he's not following in this paragraph. For the sake of thousands of victims and their families, and for countless others who will surely become victims if we don't prevail, by all means, let us try to save some. What bothers me about this paragraph is that the suggestion that opposition to the laws that were proposed was unprincipled. The opposition, as I saw it, was entirely principled, and support for those laws was entirely emotional. There was no principle behind it. I mean, they're hiding behind this term gun safety and to hide their real intentions, so there's no principle there. You talk about unprincipled. Senators who talk about saving lives and then they put all their efforts behind a political agenda that has nothing to do with saving lives and everything to do with passing gun control. That's a really weird idea of principle, in my opinion.
Yes, it is.
And then for a man of God to impugn the motives of senators who voted against his preferred outcome in this legislative battle. I mean, he talks about following the commandments, but he's not exactly following the 8th commandment here.
No surprise.
No surprise. And then finally, the logical fallacy that these laws are going to save lives and that we have to pass gun control or people are going to die. It's one or the other. There's not an alternative in the middle, like, I don't know, putting criminals in jail. If we don't pass gun control, we're just going to have more death. We can't find some other alternative.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's the same thing over and over, but expecting different results.
Yes.
It's the classic definition of insanity.
This is the kind of pig ignorance that made me run screaming from the United Methodist Church years ago, and I never looked back.
Good for you. You make a good Lutheran.
Thank you. Final thoughts on this one?
Well, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, so I'm not going to. But he brings, the one passage he brings up is 1 Corinthians 9, verse 22. There's nothing in here whatsoever to even remotely suggest that we have to engage in activism to increase gun control. And the second thing, his entire premise here is that we need more gun control laws for the safety of our communities. And if that was the case, I mentioned Southern California. Same thing with Chicago. These places should be nirvana. There shouldn't be any crime because they have some of the strictest laws in the country when it comes to firearms.
All right. Well, I think that does it for this guy. That's going to wrap it up for another episode of Clinging to God and Guns. Thank you all for listening. Pastor, thank you for joining us again.
Absolutely.
And tune in again next time for another episode when we'll take on another article, or who knows what we'll take on next time. We'll find some fun and we'll get into it next week right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org.
And that's going to wrap it up for this week. If you like what you heard or you have any comments or questions, be sure to check out the feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you to my awesome contributors, Sergeant Bill Silvia, Mia Anstine, and Pastor John Bennett. Aaron Israel will be back with us next week when he returns from vacation. And thank you to our sponsors for your continued support. Be sure to check them out and let them know you appreciate their support for the show. Thank you, dear listener, for joining us, for downloading, for subscribing. We'd appreciate if you'd tell your friends about the show, share it with others, leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to join us again next week. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying, We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.